Christy Vale didn't come to Seoul to fall in love. She came because a child was dying. She was 32, a British cardiac surgeon on a 6-month fellowship at Seoul General, the kind of woman who ate lunch standing up and slept 4 hours because the alternative was a child not waking up. She had no family waiting at home, no one who called twice if she didn't answer. On a Tuesday night in November, a black van pulled up outside her apartment building. A man in a suit knocked on her door and said 3 words in careful English. "Doctor, come now." She should have said no. She knew that. But he showed her a photograph, a boy, maybe 7 years old, blue at the lips, and she grabbed her coat. They drove 40 minutes into a part of Seoul her map didn't name. The house was not a house. It was a compound, walled, guarded, silent the way only money and fear can make a place silent. Inside, past 3 locked doors, a little boy lay in a bed too big for him, barely breathing. She worked for 2 hours without stopping. When she looked up, a man was standing in the doorway. He was tall for a Korean man, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. There was a scar that ran from his left jaw to his collarbone. He was watching her the way people watch things they are afraid to want. "Is he alive?" he said. "He is," she said. "Who is he to you?" The man was quiet for a moment. "He is my son." Christy looked at him. Then she looked at the boy. Then back at him. "And his mother?" "Gone," he said. One word, a door closing. That was how Christy Vale met Kang Pai, which was not his birth name but the only name Seoul's underworld had called him for 15 years. It meant street boss. It meant the one you do not cross. She didn't know any of that yet. She just knew the boy's fever had broken, and the man in the doorway looked like someone who had forgotten, a very long time ago, that he was allowed to feel relieved. She came back. Not because he asked, because the boy, whose name was Junho, had developed a secondary infection, and Christy's conscience didn't negotiate. She arrived at the compound at 7 a.m. with antibiotics and a bag of equipment. The guard at the gate looked at her like she was insane. She looked back like she was bored. Kang Pai was eating breakfast alone at a table large enough for 20 people when she walked in. "You came back," he said. "Your son needs a second round of treatment," she said. "Where is he?" He stood slowly. "Most people don't come back here voluntarily. Most people aren't trying to keep a 7-year-old alive." Something moved behind his eyes. He led her upstairs without another word. She treated Junho for an hour. When she came out, Kang Pai was sitting in the hallway on the floor, back against the wall, like a man who had been waiting outside a door his whole life. "You could have sent a driver," he said. "Drivers don't monitor oxygen levels." He looked at her for a long time. "What do you want? Money? I will pay whatever." "I want him to live," she said. "That's all." He went very still, like the words had hit somewhere old and unhealed. "People always want something," he said quietly. "I know," she said. "I'm not people." She left. He stood at the window and watched the car until it disappeared. Junho tugged his sleeve from the doorway. "Appa, is she coming back?" Kang Pai didn't answer immediately. "Sleep," he said, but his hand was still on the curtain. She told herself it was just medicine. Junho needed monitoring. She returned 3 times that week. Each time, Kang Pai was there. Each time, he said less than she expected and watched more than she was comfortable with. On the 4th visit, she found an envelope on Junho's nightstand. Inside, $50,000. She walked downstairs and put it on his breakfast table. "I don't want your money." "Everyone wants my money." "Then everyone you know is lying to you." He looked at the envelope, then at her. "Why are you really here, doctor?" "Because your son called my hospital line yesterday and asked when I was coming. He's 7. I'm not going to disappoint a 7-year-old. Kang Pai's jaw tightened. He hadn't known Junho had called. That night, Christy sat in her apartment and gave herself a serious talk. She knew what this man was. The driver who picked her up had let one thing slip. Mr. Kang Pai controls everything north of the river. She had Googled enough to understand what that meant. Bodies. Power. Silence bought with fear. She made a decision. Junho was stable. She would do one final check and end it. She came the next morning to say goodbye. Junho was sitting up in bed drawing. He held up the paper, a crayon portrait of a woman with yellow hair and a stethoscope. Underneath it, in careful child's handwriting, "My doctor. She saves people." Christy sat down on the edge of the bed. She didn't trust her voice for a moment. "Who taught you to draw?" she asked. "My mom used to," Junho said, "before she left." She didn't leave that day. 3 weeks later, someone tried to kill her. She was leaving the hospital at midnight when a car mounted the pavement. She threw herself sideways. The car clipped her shoulder and kept driving. By the time she stood up, shaking, Kangpei's men were already there. She never figured out how they knew. She didn't ask. They brought her to the compound. Kangpei was in his office when they walked her in. He looked at her torn sleeve, her bleeding elbow, the shock still white on her face, and something in him went dangerously quiet. "Who knew you were treating my son?" he asked. "I don't know." "Think." "I didn't tell anyone. I'm not stupid." He turned to his men and said something sharp in Korean. They left. The room was suddenly very small. "You'll stay here tonight," he said. "I'm not staying. Someone tried to kill you outside my son's doctor's hospital at midnight. Until I know why, you don't go back to that apartment." She wanted to argue. Her shoulder was throbbing. Her hands were still trembling. "One night," she said. He nodded. He poured her a glass of water and set it on the table without looking at her. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Yes." "Good," he said. "Pain means you're still here." She looked at him. It was the strangest comfort she had ever received. Somehow, it worked. One night became a week. On the 5th night, Junho had a nightmare. Christy heard him from the hallway, went in before the staff could, and sat beside him until the crying stopped. When she came out, Kangpei was standing in the dark corridor. "He dreams about his mother," he said. "What happened to her?" Long silence. "She found out what I was. She left, took nothing, just disappeared." He paused. "I don't blame her." Christy leaned against the wall. "How long ago?" 4 years. Junho was 3. "Does he ask about her?" "Every week." "What do you tell him?" "That she loved him. That she was afraid. That fear isn't the same as not caring." Christy looked at him in the dark. This man who ran half of Seoul's criminal empire was standing in a hallway making sure his son's nightmares didn't go unwitnessed. "Why did you become this?" she asked. Not accusing, genuinely asking. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "My father owed a debt. When I was 16, they came to collect it with knives. I paid it a different way. And after that," he stopped. "There was no other way to be safe. And now I am the thing other people are afraid of. And my son draws pictures of doctors and calls them heroes." Something broke open quietly in the space between them. "You could leave," she said. "Build something else." "People like me don't leave," he said. "We disappear or we die." She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did he. They stood in the dark hallway and said nothing, and somehow that was the most honest conversation either of them had in years. It started small. Junho insisted Christy eat breakfast with them. Kangpei didn't object. She sat at that enormous table and ate rice porridge with a 7-year-old who talked non-stop about dinosaurs and a crime lord who listened to his son like nothing else in the world existed. "Appa, did you know the T-Rex had tiny arms but a huge heart?" "I did not know that," Kangpei said seriously. "Dr. Christie, is that true? About the heart?" "Scientifically speaking," she said, "the T-Rex heart was massive for its body size. Your father is correct to take that seriously." Kangpei looked at her sideways. She didn't smile. Neither did he. But something passed between them. Warm, quiet, dangerous. That evening he showed her the rooftop garden. Herbs, mostly. Perilla, chrysanthemum. A small persimmon tree. "You grow things," she said, surprised. Junho likes to water them. I just keep them alive. That's what I do too, she said. He looked at her. Keep things alive? Yes. Is it enough? He asked. Does it feel like enough? She thought about her empty apartment, her unanswered calls from home, the colleagues who respected her but didn't really know her. Some days, she said honestly. Yes, he said softly. Some days. That night she realized she had stopped counting the days until she left. That terrified her more than the car that had tried to kill her. His mother arrived without warning. Madame Yeon was 70 years old and walked like she owned the ground beneath every room she entered. She took one look at Christy sitting at the breakfast table with her son and grandson, and her face became a wall. "Who is this?" she said in Korean. Junho answered before anyone could stop him. "She's Dr. Christy. She saved me. She lives here now." Madame Yeon sat down slowly. She looked at Christy the way a jeweler looks at a stone they've already decided is fake. "Women like you," she said in precise, cold English, "don't sit at this table." The room stopped. Kangpai went still. Christy set down her cup. "Mother," Kangpai said, "she is a foreigner, a stranger. This family has enemies. This table is sacred." Madame Yeon didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "She will bring danger to this house and leave when it suits her. They always leave." "She saved Junho's life," Kangpai said quietly. "She was paid to." She returned the money. Silence. Madame Yeon looked at Christy with something colder than hatred. It was dismissal, complete and total. "Leave," she said, "while you still can." Christy stood up. She looked at Kangpai. His face was stone. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just sat there, the most powerful man north of the Han River, and said nothing. That was what broke her. Not the mother. Him. She picked up her coat. She walked out. She didn't look back. In the car, she pressed her forehead against the cold window and closed her eyes and told herself this was always how it was going to end. She had known it. She had always known it. Junho watched from the upstairs window until the car disappeared. For 3 days, Kangpai said nothing. He handled business. He took meetings. He signed things. His men gave him a wide berth because his silence had a weight to it that made the air in every room feel pressurized. On the 3rd night, Junho stopped eating. "Where is Dr. Christy?" he asked. "She went home." "Why?" "Because—" "Did Halmoni say something mean?" Kangpai looked at his son. "Junho." "She did. I saw her face." The boy pushed his bowl away. "You always let Halmoni win." The words landed like a verdict. That night, Kangpai sat in the rooftop garden alone for 2 hours. The persimmon tree, the perilla, the things he kept alive without knowing why. He thought about what Christy had said. You could leave, build something else. He thought about what his mother had said. They always leave. He thought about Junho's drawing. She saves people. He picked up his phone. He put it down. He picked it up again. He called her. It rang 4 times. "Hello?" Her voice was careful, guarded. "My son stopped eating," he said. "Is he sick?" "No, he's angry." Pause. "He said I always let her win." Silence on her end. "He's 7, Kangpai said, "and he's braver than I am." Christy didn't speak for a long time. "What do you want, Kangpai?" He closed his eyes. "I want you to come back," he said. "Not for Junho. For me. I want you to come back for me." She came back at dawn. Kangpai was at the gate. No guards, no drivers. Just him, in a dark coat, standing in the gray morning light like a man who had decided to stop being afraid of what he wanted. "Your mother," Christy started. "My mother does not run my table," he said. "Not anymore. Kangpai, I told her last night. I told her that the woman who returned $50,000 and sat with my son through his nightmares and never once asked me what I was worth. That woman sits wherever she wants in my house." He paused. "She didn't like it." "I imagine not. She'll come around, and if she doesn't, He stopped. Some things matter more than keeping the peace. Christy looked at him for a long time. I don't need saving, she said. I need someone who doesn't disappear when it costs something. I know, he said. Neither do I. Junho appeared behind him in dinosaur pajamas, hair wild from sleep, eyes wide. Dr. Christie. He ran. She caught him. She held him longer than she meant to. When she looked up over his shoulder, Kangpei was watching her the way he had watched her that very first night, like something he was terrified to want and had decided to want anyway. Junho says the T-Rex had a massive heart, he said quietly. He did, she said. Maybe there's something to that. She laughed. It was the first real laugh she'd had in days. He didn't laugh. He just looked at her like it was the best thing he'd heard in years. Inside the house, at the head of that long table, a second cup of tea was already waiting. She sat down. Nobody told her to move. The bride didn't sit with the staff. She sat at the head of the table of the most feared man in Seoul, and that was the only family that ever counted.